Prahlada continued to contemplate. Luckily for me, the deadly serpent of craving for sense pleasure has been left far behind, and all delusions and hopes have been quietened. The deadly serpent of craving for sense pleasure. We can get into the idea that this is a nice poetic phrase. It's important to identify that in our own experience. And one place you can look for it is in this pain body that Eckhart Tolle talks about, in which a lot of us seem to be carrying around and engaging with. Perhaps that pain body can be understood in terms of craving for sense pleasure. All delusions and hopes have been quietened. We tend to, in Western culture, we tend to think that hope is good, and that to abandon hope is to give in to despair, which says a lot about that strand of thinking. Hope means investing in the future, which means investing in something which doesn't exist. It means that you feel there's no point in investing in the present moment, and that somehow you have to do what you can to get away from the present moment. Well, we're going in the completely opposite direction. We're going towards the present moment, and therefore we give up hopes. It doesn't mean to say you give in to bleakness and despondency. You're actually affirming the positive aspect of your present being. Because, as Prahlada says, I have attained the plane of supreme truth. That plane is available to you now. The Lord, who is the Self, has been seen by me by means of singing hymns, salutations, prayer, peace of mind and disciplined living. By the grace of Lord Visnu, the realization of the Supreme Being is firmly established in my heart. Prahlada's a demon lord who converted to worship of Lord Visnu. And this might seem a bit of a contradiction to what we had earlier in the Yoga Vasishta. It appears in several places. But back in section 2, for example, it's dismissing the notion of divine dispensation. Yeah, in chapter 7, in section 2, self-effort is based on these three: knowledge of scriptures, instructions of the preceptor, and one's own effort. Fate or divine dispensation does not enter here. Hence, he who desires salvation should divert the impure mind to pure endeavour by persistent effort. This is the very essence of all scriptures. The wise seeker knows the fruit of my endeavours will be commensurate with the intensity of my self-effort, and neither fate nor a God can ordain it otherwise. Indeed, such self-effort alone is responsible for whatever man gets here. So it's got nothing to do with God. But Prahlada has been throwing himself into his worship of Vishnu with great vigour. And quite astonishingly, actually, because this kind of path doesn't normally lead to any kind of self-realization. But it seems that Vishnu has granted him this initial boon of realization of his awareness. And I've said before, this kind of awareness, there's no way to find it. You stumble upon it. You can say it happens by chance, it happens by divine dispensation. Whatever, it doesn't really matter what the reason is. You stumble upon self-awareness. It's the only way you can find it. And once you've found it, that's when you make the effort. You make the effort to establish yourself in it. So there's a difference between finding it and establishing yourself in it. And I suspect most of us stumble upon it several times a day. It's not hard to find. That's been pointed out often enough. We just don't appreciate what it is we've stumbled on, or we don't acknowledge it. Or maybe we find it creepy because it undermines all our thoughts about who we are and the kind of world we're living in. So, by the grace of Lord Visnu, Prahlada found that initial realization, but as he said before, by the excellence of his own self-effort, in fact just earlier in this chapters, and through my own excellent self-effort I have attained that wisdom. He's become established in it through his own self-effort. Till now I was harassed by ignorant limitations and delusions. The forest of ignorance has numerous anthills inhabited by deadly snakes in the form of sense cravings, many blind holes known as death, and many forest fires of sorrow. In it roam the thieves of violence and greed, as also the most deadly enemy of ego sense. Now I am free of that by the grace of Lord Visnu, as also by my own self-effort, and my intelligence has been fully awakened. In the light of that awakened intelligence, I do not perceive an entity which can be called ego sense, even as one does not see one has arisen. Now that the goblin of ego sense has been laid, I remain at peace within myself. So it's that game of cravings and disappointments that we get out of. When the truth is seen and the ego sense has been dispelled, where is room for delusion, sorrows, hopes, desires, and mental distress? I'm making a note of that mental distress here because occasionally there's a bit of confusion between the sort of suffering that the spiritual traditions address. It doesn't take you beyond pain. It takes you beyond suffering in the sense of mental distress. Heaven and hell, as also delusions concerning liberation, exist only as long as the ego sense exists. Pictures are painted on a canvas, not on empty sky. When the intelligence is freed from the cloud of ego sense and from the thunderstorm of cravings, it shines with the light of self-knowledge, even as the sky shines during the autumnal full moon night. O self, free from the mire of ego sense, salutations to you. O self, in whom the fearsome sense and all-consuming mind have attained quiescence, salutations to you. O self, in whom the lotus of bliss has fully blossomed, salutations to you. O self, whose two wings are consciousness and its reflection, and who dwells in the lotus of the heart, salutations to you. O self, the sun that dispels the darkness of ignorance in the heart, salutations to you. O self, the promoter of supreme love and the sustainer of all things in the universe, salutations to you. This is a nice hymn, isn't it? And here we've got love mentioned. This doesn't come into it often. It's often bliss, but it's the promoter of supreme love. This is our awareness. This is a hymn in appreciation of our essential awareness. This is what Prahlada is reveling in. This realization of his own awareness and its cosmic aspect, its cosmic implications. And I think it's worth just dwelling on this paragraph and appreciating it and relating to it